Thank you for being here this morning for a conversation with a really special new arrival now to Miami. Been here now for 2 years.
Toddler,
right? Just getting going. But someone who, as you'll learn, has been doing and is doing extraordinary things around the world and now calls Miami home. And so really excited. So I want to do a couple things. Quick description of Opportunity Miami, an introduction of Reshma, and then we'll get going with a conversation. We'll talk for about 25 minutes or so, open it up for questions, and then we can go on about our day and do some amazing things. So my name is Matt Hagman. This is Opportunity Miami. So Opportunity Miami is a little over a year and a half old. It is an initiative that we started that's housed within Beacon Council, which is the economic development organization for the Miami metropolitan area. Public-private partnership. Both gets funding from county government, but also the private sector. And Opportunity Miami is an effort to focus on Miami's economic future, thinking about 2030, 2040, when the child today will be ready to enter the workforce, very intentionally pulling ourselves out of the here and now and trying to think about the next decade, the next 2 decades, right? And imagining what we would like that world to look like and what we can do now to build it. And how we've been doing this work to date is really around trying to elevate the very best ideas and people to engage across the community. And then what we're going to be doing a lot more of going forward is really trying to goal set as a community about where we need to go as we think about talent development, as we think about company creation, startup activity, as we think about the transitioning to a net zero economy, to goal set and then to track our progress is how we're doing. And this conversation is part of that, and really talking with thought leaders in our community, thought leaders in the world, about our world and where we go next as we think about our future. And so the amazing person we have today is Reshma Sohoni. Reshma is the co-founder and managing partner of Seedcamp. She has been called one of the true OGs of the Europe tech scene. She co-founded Seedcamp back in 2007. It has grown to become one of the most successful and prominent early-stage funds in Europe. She has invested more than 470 companies, 10 of which have become unicorns, valued at more than $1 billion. Reshma was named to Forbes' Midas list of the best seed investors in the world. In fact, I think they've been doing that list for 2 years, and you were named on both lists. Reshma has also been a leader in building London's tech ecosystem, resulting in her receiving an MBE from the Queen. How cool. For her contributions to the UK tech community. She continues the work of spotting and supporting world-changing startups, and in fact, Seedcamp raised its 6th and latest fund of $180 million. But most important of all for us, Reshma now lives in Miami. So please welcome Reshma Sohoni.
Thanks. Really good to be here. Thank you.
So, Reshma, let's start with this. So,
Actually, can I ask a question?
Of course you can ask a question.
How many, just to get context in the room, how many people are some sort of an advisor or consultant? Yeah, we'll get into that. How many are entrepreneurs who are not consultants or advisors? Okay. And tech operators or operators in general? All right. Thanks.
There we go. Reshma is probably the most practiced person at speaking on panels and interviews at these sorts of things.
I can go on forever.
Yes, so we really appreciate you giving us some of your time. And this conversation, we're gonna focus on the future. Of course, if you guys have questions about the current state of affairs, please have at it. But really gonna sort of structure it around talking about startups, talking about ecosystem building, and then Miami. And before we spin it forward, we'll sort of go back and tell us a little bit about why did you launch a venture fund all the way back in 2007, focused on early stage startups, and tell us about how you then went about building this community of companies and investors to then become one of the most prominent VCs in Europe.
Super, and interrupt me if I go on. Everything to me begins with context. So just for context, I was born in India, grew up in the Northeast coast, so very sort of Americanized in how I grew up. Went to college there, worked in investment banking and venture capital in New York and back in India again, and then I went to do my MBA in France. So an immigrant multiple times, right? And went to a continent to do my MBA where I literally didn't know anyone. Graduated with, I guess, 600 friends, right, within 9 months. So I think that context helps about being multi-immigrant. My background is technology. I did an engineering and an undergrad in business, so always this marriage of technology and business. And then in Europe, all the experience, collecting all those experiences, working across continents. My first job was out of MBA, was at Vodafone, and I worked literally across the European footprint. My last gig was helping turn around our Japan operation and then selling it back to SoftBank. I'd actually worked at a SoftBank fund in New York, so SoftBank's been it's in everyone's psychology, right? But a collection of all those experiences to what I saw in Europe, especially working with Vodafone. And I always said, I got to get back into venture. I got to get back. I love that job. It was my favorite thing in the world. Got to get back into it. How do I do that? But basically, I did end up at a kind of a British firm built after the ruins of World War II. And I was like, this looks amazing on paper. Within 6 months, I got fired for my very loud American attitude. And so I know, right? And so coming out of that, certainly a fire, chip on my shoulder, fire in the belly, being like, oh my God, the next thing's gotta win. Otherwise, I'm going to embarrass my family, right? And so I saw kind of a desert across the European footprint, UK included in that, right? For our definition for today. So just incredible talent that I saw when I was visiting or working through Vodafone in Italy or Spain or wherever else, right? And so amazing engineering talent, real doers, but just a massive gulf, the desert, crossing from this point of the desert to that point of the desert into really world-leading businesses and becoming globally dominant businesses. And I kind of thought, this is where the opportunity Miami, this is where the opportunity is. So, the engineering mindset helps a lot. You kind of do a SWOT analysis. What are our strengths as Europe and UK? What are our weaknesses? What are the opportunities? What are no real threats at the time, I think, necessarily, but not taking an opportunity is a threat as such. So kind of looked at that, and I went in with an obnoxious attitude, which ultimately was a winning ingredient, which is I just thought, let's make it a United States of Europe. Nobody wanted that in Europe, right? And I notice it here, being again an immigrant into Miami as such, is like there isn't a United States of Latin America here. Even though Miami is the capital of Latin America, it's not united. And so maybe someone here will be inspired to create more unification of the Latin American states in Miami. I think that would be quite powerful. But so I went in with that attitude of, well, America works because we have this United States, and so we just need to do this. And so one of the things we started with Seedcamp was anywhere we went across the European footprint, I met someone from Serbia here today. So Serbia, France, especially in France, we were like, you have to pitch in English. Everything's got to be done in English. It's all about America or bust for these companies, because that's how you win. You go to the US and become really really large. So all our 10 unicorns absolutely have US as a critical customer, right? Or base of operation. So a lot of those sort of insights, which were contrarian, which were probably obnoxious, and actually were quite helpful in unifying and really bringing collaboration and forcing collaboration to happen. But what again, back to why did I start? I saw the desert, and I was like, we got to plant trees here. We got to plant seeds, right? Seed camp, and however we do it, got to water it. We got to feed it, feed this desert the right kind of ingredients, and hopefully it blooms. And 16 years later, yeah,
extraordinary. Well, you were way ahead of the curve.
Yes,
doing this in 2007.
It does take allies. So we had allies. We had again a lot of American-trained venture capitalists, American-trained founders, American-trained technologists, and we just sort of came together as allies and just kept building and building. And there was so much collaboration. I mean, I still hear it from young VCs. I just met a woman a couple of days ago who's moved from San Francisco to here, and she when she goes to London, she's like, you guys collaborate so much. You're not constantly trying to elbow each other out, backstab each other, which is what she sees in the Valley, San Francisco. And I said, exactly. I mean, so you need allies. We had a few powerful allies we have great universities there across the European footprint, as well as capital. We really had that capital, which was
the two fundamental ingredients: talent and
capital.
funding and capital. Talk about the sort of the qualities when you were launching Seedcamp, the qualities you were looking for in your entrepreneurs who you were funding, and also though in the partners too, who you're aligning with and doing this work, and talk about how, if that has changed at all as now 17 years in and pushing forward.
Yeah, and I mean, I think you gotta know your truths in whatever opportunity you're seeing, and as we sit here thinking about 20 years out, you've got to know your truths, and you have to be right. Like, you can't be wrong about them. So, but they might be contrarian. So, one of the things, again, what we did was we used to have events to really just, again, get people, literally hitting each other, right? And sitting in a room together, which again, today with all things remote seems contrarian, but back in the day, people fly him over, get him into these, remote little places, Ljubljana, which no one really knew until they got there, or Tallinn, Estonia, or wherever. So that was contrarian, to pull people, bring them all from all across, because again, they would just be siloed. The Slovenians would talk to Slovenians, the Estonians would, just talk to each other, right? And that's not how we're going to become multi-billion-dollar businesses. So we literally, and Geeks on a Plane. I don't know if you guys know Dave McClure, who started that.
We brought them here.
Right, exactly. So same. It's like you gotta physically get out there. And the other interesting thing we did was counter to the class system in the UK. We said the founders are the VIPs. So even our events would be like the founders would sit there, and these billionaires and millionaires would walk around, move around, and we used to always have it at university. We made them write their own name tags. I mean, it was just like, but I was just always thinking about, how do I cut time? How do I make this efficient? How do I, get people to be authentic and not treated the way they tend to be treated at palaces and things, right? And so just a lot of these contrarian, but truth. Actually, people were there to mentor these startups, to have conversations about technology. They weren't really there to have the best, the best croissant of their life or whatever, right? And so sorry, I feel like I've gone off tangent, but
no, this is great.
Yeah,
this is great.
So
well, talking about the qualities,
the truths, yes, and then
and spinning it forward.
So yeah, and critically, again, we knew a truth, what our truth was. These first 6 founders we funded. Our first year we funded 6 companies, and then it just kept growing from there. Now we fund about 30 to 40 companies a year. We knew we would succeed or die depending on what funding those first 6 companies got. So I built my first fund was only angel and VC money, but they were people who would invest in the next round of these 6 companies or the next round after. I only looked 2 rounds ahead, because I said, if we get 6 out of 6 or close to that success rate for the next round, I know we're headed for success, right? So it was also thinking, massive ambition of ultimately we're going to have companies that go public in, on New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ, but I can't aim for that right now. You got to climb step by step. I can't just do a jump. So my 6 companies have got to get funded. So my first fund was 2.5 million euros. We now, our assets under management are nearly 1 billion, right? That's massive. Yeah. So yeah, we've nailed it. But the first bit of, I took no money from people who had money in sort of large capital pools, because you're not going to fund my company next. It's going to be the angels who are going to write the 100K check, the 500K check, and it's going to be the VCs who are going to write the first, million or 2. So that's what we obsessed over, is group of people around the table who, and they would take that kind of risk. They had that risk appetite to put this money and sort of say, maybe I'll never see it again, or maybe it'll go to the next round, and so forth. And the founders were pretty consistent from 16 years ago to today, in that we make talent bets. like we are definitely
You're betting on the entrepreneur.
we're betting on the entrepreneur, the team of entrepreneurs, and then their brain. We're all our, like I had a partner pitch this morning, 16 years ago or today, it's the same. All our questions are all about a bottom-up thinking versus top-down thinking, and really investigating your brain to see how you are going to think about the things you know, the things you know you don't know, the things you don't know, and those three things. So,
What are some, for instances, in those meetings, some of the questions that you're asking?
I mean, you kind of come off, like we come pretty off-piste with asking about a technology advance or a device or land, or, I talk a lot about sandboxes, and we'll talk about that with Miami as well. It's like, okay, what if this happened? It's like, you didn't even think about that thing. And I want to know your answer on that, because I know how your brain works, right? So, and it's great. I'm in Miami now because I can bring in a lot more US insight into our partner pitches, right? So you're always looking for, is like, what can I bring here to this conversation that's gonna help me see the manifestation of their brain before they've built anything. So it hasn't changed for us. I mean, definitely founders are slicker, probably more thoughtful, more educated now. I think the entire base of education around starting up is dramatically different from 16 years ago. But you're still getting, going to the core of kind of how their brains are going to work, how they're going to recruit talent. I mean, that's one of the big things too, is like, how are you going to build your first 20 people, your first 100 people, and then so on and so forth.
So now, while you are industry agnostic,
Right.
you just said you're focused on the entrepreneur. Talk a little bit about the sectors that you think are, as we spin it forward, are really exciting and most promising. And within that, of course, one of the things we've been talking a lot about is climate. Here in Miami, I've been thinking a lot about, how can we really, about Miami being a climate tech hub, as, in its own right, as those are beginning to develop around the world. But even for climate, just broadly speaking, are there particular areas that you find yourself more interested in than others?
Yeah, so again, context-wise, we are a software-driven investor. Every time we've deviated from being a software-driven investor, because we get excited by the latest innovation coming out of universities, or just generally in the market, or founders coming to us with ideas, we don't have much success. So we're not really your kind of e-commerce investor. We don't do gaming as such necessarily. We do a little bit. So this is all 80-20 or 90-10. 90% we're software. As our team grows, it's this constant driving through of, this is what we are and this is what we're not. And so, we've recently recruited an associate onto the team. Same thing. This is what we are. This is what we're not. And we've been this for 16 years, and we know what we do, and we definitely don't know what we do. So software is our thing. And within that, there is fintech, tech bio. We don't do biotech, but we do tech bio, ag tech.
Can you describe the difference between biotech and tech bio?
Yeah, so in our view, tech bio is software driven. It's workflows. It's generally kind of removing barriers in a value chain through software, versus the next drug that you can, so we do not understand the science, therefore we won't touch it. We understand the software side, so we're all over that like a bad rash. But ag tech, ed tech, we sort of cover it all, including sustainability tech. So I think climate is interesting. I mean, there's an obsession on carbon and net zero, and we're not sure that's sustainable as focus. And I have to say, I think if you look at human behavior of our 8 billion people, just us in Miami, we do not behave as if we care about the climate. We just don't. So let's stop. I mean, we just don't. Our daily behavior. I mean, I was like, I know there's throwaway cups here. Everyone should be bringing one of these, right? We don't behave, of course. So I think we're thinking, and we don't. I don't think there's agreement on climate. So, and which is probably why we don't behave accordingly. But hopefully we agree on sustainability. And so we've been investing a lot in sustainability tech again, software driven. So actually we had this sort of futurist come talk to our companies, and he said there is no climate change. I mean, everyone in our founders were in the room like this, and everyone
forward.
Anyone just sort of like, what the hell, kick this guy out? And then he said, if I'm the smart money in the room, I'm not investing at all in climate tech. I'm investing in sustainability tech.
Describe the difference.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, the climate is like an obsession over this number, which we're not probably going to reach, right? Already the UK under Rishi Sunak has pulled back and said, actually, we're not going to reach the 2050 target or 2030 target. And that's going to happen, right? So again, we're lying to ourselves. We're lying to people. We're lying to our population, our communities, and that's where trust erodes. But what we then, after we were all angry in the room about not believing in climate change and talked about sustainability, it's like, okay, we actually do agree on core fundamentals. There is more flash flooding. There is more, these houses on the coast are in trouble, right? There is much more traffic brought by people like me coming from London and New York, and like those are real things we can agree on. So I mean, that's where we're going with our investing. Is like, okay, how and food, right? Food tech as well. So we have a company called Garden, which improves nutrition in our plants. So to us, that's sustainable. Is that climate tech? Yes. I mean, but
for sure,
it's sustainability, and it's sustainability of our population against obesity, right? Because it's more nutritious food for everyone, and not just for a few who can afford Whole Foods. So that's how we're thinking about. Not climate tech.
Not climate tech, but sustainability. That's how you think about it. And really, and really boiling down your thesis, finding amazing entrepreneurs who are attacking some big problem and using technology and software to do it.
Yes, yeah. And really digging into, is it just internet or is it true software innovation? Because that's the defensibility. And having done this again 16 years, there's only few companies in the world that matter. I mean, that's been our ambition from the beginning, is like these 10 unicorns, they're having impact. They matter. Like, so you're in a certain sense, right? Obviously small businesses matter, but the way we're thinking about, so I mean, that's why it's this constant struggle in these partner pitches. It's like, how is this, is this company going to get to the 0 to 1 million in revenue? Of course, but most companies sort of just live on in that world of 1 to 5 million in revenue. It's like, okay, we then need to hit 10. And then a lot of companies just stagnate between 10 to 20, 30 million in revenue. That's not interesting to us, right? Like 50 million, 100 million. And I mean, UiPath is at about 1.3 billion in revenue now. Revolut, Wise, some of these other companies, multi-billion in revenue now. That's impact. And it's so that's what we're driving towards. The job gets harder every year. So I mean, you read all these accolades. I'm just like, nah. I mean, that's the past. That's right. The past. To the point of Opportunity Miami, it's like, what's the next 20 years? This job just gets freaking harder.
So let's talk about ecosystem building.
Yep.
You are a leader in building the London tech ecosystem, and then through your work of funding entrepreneurs across Europe, contributing to ecosystems, in Europe and throughout Europe. And as we spin it forward, as we think about the places over the next 10 to 20 years, that will be the environments where these groundbreaking companies are built. What do you think are those, the communities, the qualities that will be in those places where those next groundbreaking companies are built? And before you dig into that question, it's just important, just for context, just to reinforce something, is that you're someone who, as you look throughout your portfolio of more than 450 plus companies, none of them actually, when you invested in them, they were coming out of, say, Silicon Valley.
Right.
These are companies that were from Berlin to Belfast to Bucharest to Oslo, and even a few companies, I think, in Nigeria and South Africa as well. As just a few you moved outside of Europe. But let's spin it forward. As the places, and Miami's one of them, that aspire to be that environment where groundbreaking companies are built, what are those really important qualities?
I mean, I think it all starts with education, and as much as you can get participants in an entire community into that education, right? And so Miami's incredible in the schools that are here, our kids that are Gulliver, but even I think one of the things when I was looking from London to be like, which school are kids going to be in, Ransom's website, I think, says 90%, 95% of our kids who graduate go outside of Florida. And that's their marketing. This is a brain drain. We cannot have this kind of brain drain. So I think we do need our universities to become a stronger magnet. Maybe we need to reach out into these schools and say, stop, or like at least, add marketing that talks about Florida universities as well, because we got to keep this talent and the more builder talent. So I think builders are critical. I mean, I do think our job in Europe was easier because what we could see is the coders in Poland were very actively being used by the companies in Silicon Valley, right? The coders, the polytechniques in France were exporting talent to Silicon Valley, but again, incredible engineering talent. Google has set up an office right near the university in Zurich, which again graduates a lot of weirdly people who understand maps and mapping technology. So Google's literally sitting right there to take that talent out. So I think we had a lot of that base. So I mean, if I'm looking across the U.S. footprint, I think again with Miami, we've got to keep this talent from leaving Florida, or at least figure out ways to bring the builder talent back, because I do think we have a lot of other things going for us strongly. With obviously there's a shitload of capital here. Like this is a problem most of Europe had. London didn't have it as much, but it had sort of different capital. We have a load of capital here, so that is not the problem. But again, it doesn't look into Florida to invest necessarily because the builder talent is lacking, right? And so I think now that we have more distributed teams, more remote teams, we have an ability to attract talent, even if they leave, to come back. And you and I have talked about, and one of the jobs I see of me being here is encouraging our European companies to base themselves in Miami.
Totally.
So for a whole host of reasons, right? Again, talent recruitment, cost of living, all of that. So that's what we need to work on, is like really get out there, talk to the different markets and see what's going to encourage this builder talent. We were just talking to Elvis, and I said, how many members do you have? And I asked around about consultants. I was like, limit your membership for the advisors and consultants to like 10% of your members. You have an AI club, just focus on the builders in AI. Tell the people who are just a bunch of you people, basically, consultants and advisors. Sorry, maybe membership will open again next year. I don't have a rotating membership of because there's a lot of advisors and consultants in Florida, and we need more builder talent.
I think, by the way, we just hit upon, which for me I think will be the takeaway from this conversation, and that is the headline is focus on the builders.
Yeah.
It really feels like that is the takeaway. So yeah.
I mean, we were talking about Walter Isaacson, and he wrote a better book called Codebreaker, multiple better books, but Codebreaker, and it does talk about, Jennifer Dauda, but actually talks about RNA and the journey of RNA from a little known ingredient to clearly a critical ingredient in fighting the recent pandemic, right? And it talks about that 30, 40 year journey. And it was entirely a collaborative effort globally. A lot of it in the middle of the pandemic, again, remote, distributed. And read that book, that's perfect for Miami. So whether we again can really build centers here for so much talent, but this is where the conversations are happening in the builder communities. And the rest of us as money are just parasites living off of these people. And I'm a parasite later on, right? And with hopefully the first check-in. But yeah, the builders is where it all begins. That's who's having the real conversations.
So if we aspire to be a place of more builders, it feels like there are a couple different arrows in our quiver that you referred to. I mean, one is, of course, around keeping the young talent that's coming up. Two is coming out of our universities. Miami has very good universities, although relative to London, it's a different story.
But we're looking 40 years out, right?
We are looking 40 years out,
So
absolutely.
we're not worried about what our university status is today.
I love it. Thank you for that. Yes.
So-
and that's right. Totally. But that's exactly it. So universities, but then also remote talent here. I guess, is this sort of, as we think about the next 20 years, is it all of the above, or within that construct, are there particular areas we should really be pushing?
Great question. I do think it's all of the above, and including government. So the other thing we benefited by, we're not, as much as the UK parties like to claim they're polarized, they're really not. And that's why the last 14 years, we've had the same political party in power. We have a lot more polarization, obviously, across the US footprint, right? And so we met this moment in time with our efforts that we got a central, and London's a special place in that it has Hollywood in London, because you got New York theater in London, you got finance of New York and in London as well, and then you got Silicon Valley or San Francisco in London with the Cambridge, Oxford University. So London is just, you can't replicate, like that's irreplicable.
It's a
So
unique thing.
But which is weird that therefore in 15 years ago felt like a desert and that nothing was happening. So we met a moment in time when all the way from the prime minister, and really credit a couple of his advisors, one named Rohan Silva, who educated him on the importance of the small startups, right, who will become the big taxpayers one day, all the way down to the founders, the small money in. We were writing $25,000 checks at the beginning of our fund, and then top down. And it was, we found alignment. And this is where I go back to sustainability. Just find alignment. I often say about Seedcamp too, it took an Indian American 2-time immigrant to start Seedcamp, because I had no choice but to get people to come together and work together. And I had no biases. I wasn't French, I wasn't German. I wasn't this powerful country in Europe trying to push my own agenda of Spain or Italy or wherever, right? Or the UK. I wasn't even British. So I was able to figure this melting pot out and really get people to find common ground. And so we met this moment where the mayor of the city, Boris at the time, David Cameron, all of that policy connected, corporates got a lot of pressure to get engaged into the community, particularly American corporates who were obviously taking advantage of tax systems in Ireland or the UK and so forth. They got really pulled into the fray, and then all of us with capital, and then the founding talent as well, right? So it does take all, but again, I will say we have the capability. Again, there's people in this room who are not only builders or not only venture capital or not only, right? And there's a lot of real estate developers, and I'm always like surprised at how many people in Florida are into property development. I'm
A
like,
lot. Yeah.
how's this, how's this possible? So we have it all. So we can, it is finding common ground. And it is getting out of your comfort zone and reaching across and finding the language that allows us to connect it all up between again, challenging here with the federal government being so large and, obviously not here. But again, you do need to connect it all up to get impact in 10 years. I mean, that's the fascinating thing about the UK, particularly Europe as well. Oh, and then the other thing was smart thing that the Dutch did and the French did and Macron did. They just copied what worked in the UK. No ego, just like it works. Copy paste. Tweak it maybe for So we have these tax breaks for, and the government was really smart to listen and say they got rid of a lot of the tax breaks for non-true tech, because as with anything with tax breaks, people will find a way. And so they really, made it for the riskiest asset class, right? And so again, France kind of copied a bunch of that. The Dutch copied a bunch of that. And copy paste. You do not need to reinvent the wheel. Just like what works, great. Tweak it to your community, your reality. But so Europe really cut the time because the UK was just so far ahead, and then Europe really cut that kind of time by adopting a lot of the things that worked, and then built their own things. Like,
what are some, for instances, of policy if for in terms of government that we're doing, is it around tax incentives that were helpful for builders or
It's
or other things?
none of this is easy. It takes a few people to really look across red tape, across workflows, across finding those loopholes that people are going to be, wherever there's laws, people are going to figure out a way to optimize them for themselves. So it takes a lot of hard work to really dig in and craft these rules, craft these laws. One of the things the UK government also did is really encouraged the FCA, and the SEC. I don't know to what extent does it, but sandbox environments. So hey, take your, whether it's whatever it was at the time, neobanking, crypto, whatever, is like, let's give you this type of a license. We're going to give it to you quite quickly versus what banks have to do or a new bank has to do, which is wait probably 5 years to get licensed. But we're gonna be all over you to make sure, we talked about healthcare is HIPAA compliant, whatever it is in the sector we're gonna be monitoring you. But your time to license was super fast, and your capital needs were nothing to get those licenses. So we can do sandbox environments in Miami. Like we have a ton of hospitals, again, proper, thinking about sustainability tech is like, we have so many properties going up, property development. Are there sandbox environments where you can say, we cut the red tape here, we give these licenses, there's forced procurement by government agencies of startup products as well. So government did a lot of that.
That's just to hit on that, and then we're going to turn to Miami and we'll get questions. But that's, for example, governments actually reserving a part of their budget, and we have folks here from local government. For example, Miami-Dade County has more than, I think with the latest budget's $11 billion to annual budget. I think Galen's here someplace. The thought is reserving a part of that for procurement that actually can go to startups for government services.
Yep.
That's one clear takeaway.
And they really pushed the integrators, so all the consultancies, PwC, EY, Deloitte, et cetera, to say you have to bring in a startup to bid for this part of the project or that part of the project, right? So the onus wasn't really on the government, it was on the integrators, which McKinsey's, that everyone has these middlemen, right? The parasites. And so force the parasites to take on that role. So it was quite smart, but takes a lot of hard work. Takes a lot of alignment across.
Okay, so I'm going to ask about Miami. You guys think of your questions, and then we'll wrap up. So, 2021, you decided to, after, and you still go back to London every month, but decided to make your home in Miami. What brought you here, and what have been your impressions since arriving here?
So my husband and I run our family like a business, so everything's a spreadsheet. And so when we both decided we're going to move, this is not a way to bring up our children in London. This is not the quality of life they deserve. We looked at Cape Town, Dubai, Lisbon, Barcelona, Lisbon, and Miami. Those were the cities on the spreadsheet. So yeah, that's quite. I mean, he's South African German, so it was Cape Town would be easy in that sense. So yeah, we just looked at different kind of criteria. Safety, not corruption, not. I mean, South Africa is challenged, obviously. So Cape Town, community, not a feeling of belonging, like a few criteria. But really, what won us over was schools. So incredible school system, again, K through 12 in certainly South Florida. And then I did not respond to the tweets encouraging people to move, but that played a part, right? Definitely the loud voices on Twitter talking about Miami being great definitely played its part. So that was attractive as well to say, not only will our kids be happier, of course, but so will I, right? There's actually like-minded people that I can be around. Because, I mean, just from an ego point, like in London, I was at the top of my career at that,
Totally.
And again, I don't know how many men would do this, where they're kind of like, yeah, no, the family is really important. Let's go.
No, for sure. But everywhere you go in London, so many different guys. I mean, you are someone you recognize,
right.
And to go to a place where there's much less of that.
Exactly. So, but yeah, the schools really drove us, and these other criteria around sort of safety or not. And look, we live down in South here, and it's a bubble, right? And we got to get out of our bubbles. Like that's, again, do some uncomfortable things. Bring 5 friends over that we're not your friends, and bring them over for dinner, have a conversation. It's like people just really stay in bubbles here. So I encourage everyone to get out more and be a little less comfortable. I'm obviously not comfortable here, right? So and I'm making making inroads there. So, but yeah, it was very uncomfortable to move in your 40s from a place you are doing well in. No reason to move.
You are the
no reason to move.
star.
Yeah, no reason to move. So why are we doing this? But yeah, so that technology, and I gotta say, we do. I think the commute to London is far easier from Miami than New York. So maybe you can tell a little bit about my personality. I'm always looking at what's the positives. It's a great 8.5-hour flight. Just go on. The airport it needs severe improvement, but infrastructurally, but what an airport, right? 15 minutes, and everything's easy, and you get on and you sleep. And I'm in London for work the next day. So all of those things work really well.
So we're obviously thrilled you're here.
Yeah.
You mentioned bubbles, but curious sort of beyond that. You're at an interesting place now. It's been about 2 years. And, so still early in your Miami journey, but still enough time to begin to form some opinions. Beyond the bubbles, some of your impressions of the place.
So as I said, I think we have the positives. We have incredible talent. Let's figure out a way to keep it. We have an incredible elderly sector in Florida, right? Let's figure out a way to do something with it, which is tech bio or health tech, healthcare systems. One of our companies in London got sold to an American company that's actually based out of Arizona. It's in recovery post-surgery, and I was like, and obviously they have offices in Florida too. I was like, they should move their headquarters to Florida. I mean, we have this incredible aging population here. Problems, but opportunities. We have sustainability problems here, but opportunities, right? So I feel like all of those ingredients, where there are problems, there are opportunities to solve problems to solve. So
Here.
Amazing. So we've got young talent. We've got problem sets to solve, and big ones, $1 trillion. I definitely believe in personalized healthcare as our 40-year journey to keep us living well till age 120. So then that's an unreal opportunity, right? And then we've got capital, Palm Beach down. I mean, it's insane amount of capital, right?
Totally.
And so let's unlock that smartly. Let's talk to them in the right way, because they're doing their own, I know I'm doing my own thing. I'm very Europe focused. But let's pull us out and get us into the, speaking here and things like that, is unlock a lot of that capital. So that's the positives. I think on the challenges, which we need to break through, is I already talked about, get out of your bubbles, keep this talent in. But I do find we're amazing at celebrating, but I'm not sure we're celebrating the right things. So
Love that. Please tell us more about that. That's great.
We celebrate hype here. Yeah. And
yes, Miami does that well.
Yeah. So I think just we gotta stop. We gotta stop believing our own BS, and just, again, where's the building happening? How can we elevate those stories? Because they don't look good on a magazine. They're not as attractive. But that's where the real stories, those are the stars. That's elevate those stories. If we end up having more sandboxes, elevate the stories about that sandbox environment, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, right? Because I find it's the same people getting celebrated over and over.
By the way, just very quickly, just for the group, when you're talking about sandboxes, just so everyone's on the same page, when you say sandbox, what do you mean?
I do mean sort of taking things that require big regulatory, big capital, and figuring out ways to miniaturize solving that problem, and doing it in, like I said, we did with banking licenses in the UK, but within or government contracts, where it's hey, the contract's going to be 20 million, but actually this part of it you have to have, or X% you have. So miniaturizing grand problems into solvable problems in these sandboxes, again, with the buildings that are going up, or micro communities that are here. So I hope that's helpful for some of the people working here. So I think elevating some of those stories that are not, that are the real building that's happening.
Well, I think a couple themes here. For sure, and this has been in your life as an investor, but I think it's, and talking just what you were saying about Miami, is sort of go where people aren't looking. And you talked about how we're sort of celebrating, you sort of see the same people being celebrated. Well, there's so much more here. Go to those places and celebrate those things. But in particular, if I'm hearing you correctly, if we're all hearing you correctly, is that as we think about Miami, as we think about successful communities over the next 10 to 20 years, it's those communities that are focused on the builders.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I mean, so there's a woman so Gulliver, there's a woman, a parent who's a product manager at Meta. So she came in to do a product talk. I was like, yes, that's, again,
Yes.
that's what's going to be amazing for these kids who are in school is to, 5 years ago, because she only moved here a couple years ago as well. It's like 5 years ago, that wouldn't happen. But, on the school boards or whatnot, get more tech people. They're here. Get more tech people involved. Again, it's a lot of I'm like, wow, another property developer on this school board, huh?
But you got to look around the corner.
Look around the corner.
Got to look around the corner. All right. Questions? I think we have a mic here, and we'll take about 10 minutes, and then I know you got to run. So why don't we go right here?
Thank you so much. Sylvia with Logos Capital, also building. Thanks for coming. We're working on a MOU between the state of Florida and the government of the UK to have 3 sandboxes: a fintech sandbox, an insurtech, and a climate tech sandbox. Is there any way that you might be able to sort of, talking about doing and getting involved and taking advantage of sandboxes, what advantages do you see, from your point of view, or any contributions to be able to help catalyze the sandbox that's currently being negotiated between Florida and the UK? Thanks.
I mean, obviously, probably dig into more detail there about what is your question about? I mean, where is it related to, like talent or capital or customers?
Go from idea to traction with it, because it's we're setting it up now, but like how do you knowing what you know?
I guess so. How to take, if someone aspires to do these sandboxes in some of these big areas, what are those first steps that are important to take?
So, I mean, I think the fact that you're talking, whether it's the UK government or Singapore or within any particular sector, I mean, those 2 places do a lot, right? And even in the Middle East, like Dubai is again trying to really elevate themselves out of old into new. Israel's an amazing place also for, again, innovation, the startup nation. I mean, it's a lot of that dialogue. So, whether it's events like Art Basel or, Miami Tech Week, I think it's those conversations, is the sharing of that knowledge, pulling people over. Trust me, like people in UK definitely want to come over here, right? So talk about like opposite of everything offered in London. So I mean, a lot of that kind of conversation and learning best practices. And I think like, where can we just, cut the learning, implement, but I'm sure there's probably a lot more detail with what you're working on here. So I feel like I'm being a bit, superficial, but I think it is just constantly having like cutting through and seeing what you can just learn a lot faster or just copy paste.
Awesome. Okay, another question, Olivia, right here. Well, just who you have the mic? Okay. Go ahead, and then we'll go.
So thank you very much. Very inspiring. Loved listening to you. My question is, what's your take on AI? So I'm working a lot with, or primarily with, a lot of startups, also seed, pre-seed, Series A, but in the supply chain tech area. And I constantly get confronted, like you said, sustainability, eco-tech, but I also hear AI-based technology, AI learning.
Right.
From your experience working in the different industries you mentioned, what's your take on it?
It's colossal, it's revolutionary, it's paradigm shifting, which to me means every company is going to be AI, whether it's thin. We in the venture world we talk a lot about thin layer applications, deeper AI as well. Whether it's thin in terms of building more machine learning in how you in how you build your own product. Tech products in our case, how you deliver those, how the workflow of your customers is impacted. There will be much more automation and machine learning. I mean, it'll be, today people saying I'm a .ai, .ai company. It's actually Anguilla, right? Anguilla is the beneficiary of it, which is hilarious. Anyways, tangent. They have to figure out what the hell to do with those dollars that are flooding into Anguilla for the AI domain. Maybe some of you can help them. But anyway, sorry, tangent.
Exits in Miami was .co.
Right.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, exactly. So, sorry, but it'll be like a company today saying, we have a website. I mean, what? Or our application's available on the mobile. Like that, nobody says that. So to us, that's what it will become. So we're actually in our, and there's anytime we see multiple founders essentially pitching the same thing, we know to stay away from it. And that's the beauty of investing in 40 companies a year, which means, we're seeing 1,000 plus a year. Is like we get pattern recognition extremely fast. Again, we cut our learnings fast with our approach, right? It comes with a lot of risk, but we learn fast as well. So I mean, so to me, AI is extremely fundamental. We love to invest in the infrastructure of AI as well as maybe end use. So we're investing in a lot of what is going to create problems with AI and some of the applications we see, which is biases, security, permissions, all of that, right? All of the stuff that's not sexy, we definitely invest a lot in that. So, I mean, those are a lot of hallucination, all of that. Those problems, we're focused a lot on that because they're the picks and shovels for the gold rush. But yeah, so I think it's going to be everywhere. Those who don't adopt automation, machine learning, AI are going to be left behind, are going to definitely be the losers of this whole paradigm shift. But I think it's just going to be part of every company's DNA.
So AI is eating the world.
AI,
Yeah, for sure. Olivia, right here. And by the way, just very quickly, just so everyone's right. So with the 40 companies, typically, what are the check sizes you're writing for these 40 companies?
Anywhere from $200,000 to $1 million.
Got it.
Yeah. So
Awesome. Thank you both so much. My name's Olivia. I'm with the Milken Institute, and I'm fairly new to Miami. I moved here in April and have absolutely been loving it. I've definitely heard from a number of people that it does feel fragmented, that a number of communities are kind of, separate, and you mentioned it as well with kind of being inside of your own bubble. And I'm just kind of curious to hear what your thoughts would be of how to get outside of that bubble or how to kind of help Miami do that and start to kind of collaborate more or be just less in people's own bubbles.
I mean, I think it is, whether it is online collaboration or offline, I mean, I think trying to insert yourself in every sort of where you don't know anybody situations, right? As much as that possible, I think really talking about the things you don't know, what you can help each of us, what we can help people on, what we can't help people on. Again, what can we help the builders with? It's hard. Like, I get it, though. It's hard. It's travel and traffic, right?
And traffic in Miami. Yeah.
Brightline helps, though, a lot.
Even taking the Brightline.
Yeah, a little bit, but more. Need to do more. Need to get to Orlando. So I think I get those barriers, but I think it's just like pushing yourself out. I mean, that's why in the Gulliver community is like trying to find the parents who are shy, not talking about themselves. They're probably like the meta product manager, pulling her out, and so is getting her involved more. Is like that's where the wealth of useful knowledge is, and not the people who are attending necessarily every event, because they know how to do that already. But yeah, that's pushing yourself out of that comfort zone.
Keep going around the corner. Yeah. Why don't we go right here to Jeff, and then we can wrap up. Well, Lionel, very quickly.
Hi, I'm Jeff Feldman. I'm one of those South Florida aging dinosaurs you were talking about. I've been here since '71 when we still had you pick'em fields.
Yeah.
It's changed, okay? So I'm listening to this, and I really am trying to understand a lot of what you're saying. But so here's my takeaway from what I'm hearing. Miami is incubating, right? But I'm on the Beacon Council board, so my mind thinks about economic development durability. Durability is key. what stays here once it's incubated. So I have a perception that you can incubate, but once it gets to a public offering stage, it could fly away. And so do you envision 40 years from now what's incubated staying here? Or is Miami a place to incubate businesses that fly away?
And I guess as part of that is, if you're a place that's incubating, if you're a place where the builders are, does that create a stickiness that people stay in that place?
It does. Interesting you mentioned that they fly away to list. What do you mean? At IPO, you mean, or?
Right. My perception is that people come with the idea. I'm not even quite sure why people who want to incubate a tech business are coming to Miami, other than what Ron DeSantis claims as his, and the problems that New York and California have had with tax issues as a result of Mr. Trump. But assuming there is well, I don't want to assume. I think one question I have for you is, what's bringing people to Florida, and particularly South Florida, to incubate? And then, if they're successful in finding the money and actually going from concept to an actual operating business, are they going to stay here? What needs to be here in order for these companies to stay here? That's really what I'm interested in.
Yeah, it is being able. It's talent. It really is. That's the sustainability factor for companies, from incubation to traction to scale, and
That they can find the people here
yeah,
to propel their
yeah.
business.
And that when they go out for the hackathons, the hackathons, really, that's what they care about, is, again, that they're sitting next to somebody who they can, banter with about whatever they're doing on Discord or whatever, and that there's actual, they're learning from each other. So, if you're not learning from the person next to you, you pretty much want to get out.
Would you agree that you can find the talent that you need? You have the access to the funding required, and it's a place that you like to live in.
That's a given here, right? Yeah. Everyone comes here because
That's a great asset.
That
right?
is the third one is a great asset, but at a certain moment in your career, that's not going to keep you here. So you need those other ingredients, and it really is the serendipity, the coffee. That's why a lot of that life began in coffee shops in Palo Alto. Is you could sit there and you could overhear 10 amazing conversations, and you just eavesdrop, and you take notes on what you overheard, right? And it transformed your learning. Again, it shortcut your learning, and it shortcut you getting to whatever that next thing was. We need more of those places here. So, but cost of living is better. Safety, cost of living is better. You can live more of a life. You can live more hours in Miami than you can in most places. But that's not alone going to keep,
But it helps. Yeah.
Yeah, and you need the critical mass of, I always think 50 people. Then you may build other offices elsewhere. It's hard to remove. It's hard to get rid of 50 people that are useful to your organization.
So to close us out,
Yes.
Lino.
Okay, I will close this. Hi, Leo, 23 years here, being a builder. Love the idea that you selected Gulliver. I have 2 lifers and a big promoter of the school. The question is, I love your experience having London as the center of the axis, and then the European countries. We have been doing a lot of our development in Argentina, Colombia.
Right.
How we can leverage all that. I think we haven't maximized it. And you can start to see the hubs, no? Argentina for certain code.
Right.
Colombia here, Mexico. How we can maximize it, because I think that's a real big competitive advantage.
No, that's a great point. And sorry, I didn't mention it. That's what I said before about it is not a United States of Latin America, but I think you can be in the technical talent, which is what we did with Europe. It was the Spanish technical entrepreneurs didn't give a shit. They were technical founders first. They were not Spanish first, if that makes sense. And so I think there's got to be that group of people across the Latin American footprint that are coders first, that are builders first, that are disruptors first, and whatever country they're from, third maybe, right? And Miami again can attract that, can be that gravitational pull because it connects all of those folks together here, which is what, I mean, London did that, right? People from Copenhagen would move down, recruit, Danish founders would recruit Swedes, would recruit Portuguese team members, and you'd get the United Nations when you look at the wall of 50 portraits. That's what Miami has the power with Latin America, for sure. We could certainly do it with, European founders, especially Spain and Portugal as well. So yeah, I think, more of that is that what you can't get in that Latin America, that unification you can get here.
Well, I know I've learned a ton, but
Thanks.
need to be very respectful of your time. And for me, I know my takeaway is focus on the builders and continuing that work. Let's give a big hand for Reshma Sohoni.
Super. Yay.
Thank you, Reshma.